You think you know the story of Adam, a garden, a serpent, a single tragic mistake. But what if that story is a lie? Not a complete fabrication, but a strategic simplification, a cover story for a catastrophe so vast it had to be censored from the official record. What if I told you the fall of man wasn't the beginning of the war? It was merely the first human casualty in a war that had already begun. This is not another Bible story. This is an excavation of a crime scene. For centuries, a crucial chapter has been missing from the dossier of human origins, a chapter systematically deleted from the story of Adam. This missing file contains the details of heaven's first war, a forbidden history of a celestial rebellion that spilled over into Eden and triggered the first true apocalypse on Earth. The evidence for this cover-up exists. It is not hidden in some secret vault, but in a text that they hoped you would forget, the Book of Enoch. This is the testimony of Adam's descendant, the man who walked with God and was shown the uncensored director's cut of our history. In this investigation, we will restore the deleted chapter. We will unseal the records of that first cosmic war. And you will understand why the story you were told about Adam is dangerously incomplete. They hid this from you. It's time to find out why. Before we examine the evidence of what was deleted, we must first review the official file, the version of events that has been presented to humanity for millennia. It is a story of profound beauty and equally profound tragedy, a narrative that forms the bedrock of Western civilization. It is the story of Paradise Lost. The dossier begins in a state of impossible perfection. We are told of a sanctuary, a garden called Eden, where the fabric between the divine and the terrestrial was seamless. God himself walked there in the cool of the day. He created the first man, Adam, not as a servant, but as a son, a viceroy, granting him dominion over a world free from death, decay, or corruption. He was given a partner, Eve, formed from his own side, establishing a perfect unity. The entire creation was in a state of shalom, a Hebrew word that means more than just peace. It means completeness, wholeness, and perfect harmony. The conditions of this existence were defined by a single, simple covenant, a test of loyalty and trust symbolized by two trees. One, the tree of life, offered perpetual existence. The other, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, represented a boundary. Its fruit was the only thing forbidden. It was not a test of intelligence, but of allegiance. Would humanity trust the wisdom of its creator, or would it seek to seize a different kind of knowledge for itself? This is the pristine crime scene we are shown, a world of perfect order, inhabited by beings in a state of perfect innocence. The official record is meticulous in its description of this paradise. It wants us to understand what was lost. It establishes the highest possible stakes, painting a picture of a flawless world poised on the brink of a catastrophic choice. But every good investigator, when presented with a story this clean, this simple, must ask the most important question: was the scene truly secure? Or was there an intruder already inside the gates before the story even began? The official record in the Bible seems to suggest the latter, and that is where our investigation truly begins. The official record of the fall, as presented in Genesis, is both powerful and concise. It's so concise, in fact, that it creates its own set of anomalies. Pieces of evidence that don't quite fit, silences that are deafening to an inquisitive mind. These are the loose threads that, when pulled, begin to unravel the simplistic cover story and point towards the deleted chapter. The first piece of confounding evidence is the serpent itself. The narrative introduces this character with almost no backstory. Who is he? Where did he come from? Why is he in God's perfect garden, actively working against the Creator's plan? The text simply calls him more crafty than any other beast of the field, but his intelligence, his theological arguments, and his malevolent intent are clearly not those of a simple animal. He is an undercover agent, an enemy operative already behind the lines. The official file never explains how this breach of security occurred. It's a gaping hole in the prosecution's case. The primary antagonist is an unidentified party. The second anomaly is the immediate and extreme escalation of evil after the expulsion from Eden. Adam and Eve's sin was one of disobedience born from deception. Their son, Cain, commits premeditated murder out of jealousy. Just a few generations later, a descendant named Lamech is boasting of killing a man for wounding him, establishing a personal code of disproportionate vengeance. By Genesis chapter 6, the entire planet is described as being filled with violence and corruption, so pervasive that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. A rational mind must ask, how did we get from a single act of eating forbidden fruit to a global state of total depravity so quickly? The trajectory seems impossibly steep. It suggests an accelerant, an external catalyst that was actively fanning the flames of human sin, pushing civilization towards a state of self-destruction. The official record notes the symptoms, the escalating violence, the pervasive wickedness, but it is strangely silent about the underlying disease. It describes the fire, but it redacts the identity of the arsonists. These silences are not oversights. They are the fingerprints of a story that has been edited, a chapter that has been deliberately removed. And that chapter contains the story of the first apocalypse. To solve a cold case, this ancient, an investigator needs a break. A new witness, a lost piece of evidence that reopens the entire file. For this investigation into the missing chapter of Adam's story, that break came in 1947 in the caves of Qumran. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls was not just a religious or historical event. It was an archaeological bombshell that provided the key to this entire mystery. Among those ancient scrolls, alongside the oldest known copies of the canonical Bible, were fragments of a text that had been lost to the Western world for over 1,000 years. The Book of Enoch. Before we examine its testimony, we must first establish its credibility as a witness. Who was Enoch? The official Bible record in Genesis 5 identifies him with surgical precision. He is the seventh from Adam. This is not a trivial detail. It places him in the earliest epoch of human history, a man who lived and walked among the very first generations. He was the great-grandfather of Noah, a direct link between the world of Eden and the world before the flood. The biblical account of his life is brief but profound. Unlike all the other patriarchs in the genealogy, whose entries end with the grim phrase, "and he died," Enoch's story has a different conclusion. Genesis 5:24 states, "Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more, because God took him." The Book of Hebrews later clarifies this, stating that he was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He was a man so intimately connected to the Creator that he bypassed the curse of mortality that had fallen upon Adam's lineage. The Dead Sea Scrolls prove that the book bearing his name was not a medieval fantasy, but an authentic text cherished by devout Jews in the centuries leading up to and during the time of Christ. This is our key piece of evidence. We have a witness who, according to the Bible, had unparalleled access to the divine. We have a text attributed to him that has been archaeologically verified to be ancient and respected. This is not speculation or internet myth-making. This is the foundation of our case. The Book of Enoch is the testimony of this star witness, the detailed account he left behind, the very chapter that seems to have been deleted from the main report. It's time to let him speak. Enoch's testimony begins not on earth, but in the heavens. It pulls back the curtain on a celestial drama that provides the missing context for the serpent in the garden and the explosion of evil in the early human world. The story he tells is not one of a single isolated fall of Lucifer in some timeless past. It is an account of an active, ongoing mutiny within the angelic ranks, a heaven's first war whose primary battlefront was destined to be the young planet Earth. Enoch identifies a specific class of angelic beings known as the Watchers. Their mandate was clear: to observe, to guard, but not to interfere. They were the celestial overseers of the Edenic project. However, Enoch testifies that a faction of these high-ranking beings, 200 in number, conspired together. Their leader, Semjaza, gathered them on the peak of Mount Hermon, a specific and real geographical location, adding a layer of historical grit to the account. There, they swore a binding oath, a mutual pact sealed by curses, to defy their Creator's command. Their crime was not just pride or jealousy, it was a specific consuming lust for the daughters of men. They saw the beauty of Adam's female descendants and conspired to abandon their heavenly station, illegally incarnate into physical forms, and take them as wives. This act, as described by Enoch, is the true beginning of the first apocalypse. It is the moment of violent unveiling, the tearing of the veil between dimensions. This was not a subtle temptation, it was a full-scale invasion. 200 powerful, immortal beings defected from their posts and descended upon the planet. This testimony is the key that unlocks the mystery of the serpent. The tempter in the Garden of Eden no longer appears as a lone actor. He is now understood as an agent of this broader rebellion, a scout sent ahead to weaken the defenses by corrupting humanity's leadership. Adam and Eve. The fall of man was not the opening act of the play. It was the result of a war that had already been declared in the heavens. Humanity wasn't the original target of God's enemy. It was the strategic prize, the battleground upon which this celestial war would be fought. And the Watchers' descent was their D-Day, the beginning of their physical occupation of enemy territory. The timeline is critical for any investigation. A common misunderstanding, even among those familiar with the Book of Enoch, is to place the descent of the Watchers in a vague, undefined period long after Adam. But a careful reading of the text, cross-referenced with the long lifespans recorded in Genesis, reveals a far more shocking and intimate reality. This was not a distant event. This celestial war crashed directly into the world of Adam's immediate descendants, while many of the first generations were still alive. Genesis 5 provides the chronological key. It lists patriarchs who lived for centuries. Adam himself lived for 930 years. Enoch was the seventh generation, and he was taken by God 365 years into his life. His great-grandson Noah was the 10th generation. This means that for hundreds of years, these early generations coexisted. It is highly probable that Enoch's father, Jared, was a contemporary of Adam for a significant portion of his life. The Book of Enoch explicitly states that the Watchers descended in the days of Jared. This is a precise temporal marker. It means this invasion did not happen in some mythological dream time before creation. It happened within the historical memory of the earliest humans. Adam would have still been alive, or had only recently died when this cosmic betrayal unfolded. He would have witnessed the world he was meant to steward spiral into a chaos far beyond his own initial sin. Imagine the horror from his perspective. The consequences of his own single act of disobedience were already devastating. But now he had to watch as beings of immense power, direct creations of God, launched a full-scale assault on his children and grandchildren. He saw his daughters taken, his descendants corrupted, and a new, monstrous race of beings born onto the earth. This connection is the deleted context of Adam's story. His personal tragedy was immediately swallowed by a much larger cosmic one. The world did not decay slowly. It was pushed off a cliff. The presence of the Watchers and their forbidden teachings acted as an accelerant, taking the spark of human sin and fanning it into a global inferno. Understanding this timeline is crucial. It shows that the forces of darkness did not wait patiently. They saw the vulnerability created by the fall in Eden and immediately launched a second overwhelming wave of attack, seeking to corrupt and destroy Adam's lineage before it could ever fulfill its divine potential. The Watchers' invasion was a multi-front war, targeting not just humanity's genetics, but its very soul and intellect. Their most insidious weapon was information. The Book of Enoch provides a detailed after-action report on this campaign of forbidden knowledge. A systematic transfer of celestial technology and occult science for which the young human race was utterly unprepared. This was not a gift of enlightenment. It was a deliberate act of cultural poisoning designed to accelerate humanity's dependence on power and sever its dependence on God. Enoch's testimony functions like an intelligence brief, naming the specific angelic officers and the precise weapon systems they deployed. The operation was led by Azazel, who became humanity's first arms dealer. He taught them metallurgy, the art of forging swords, knives, and shields. In a world where God's design was peace, Azazel introduced the industry of organized warfare. He didn't just give them weapons, he gave them the desire for conflict and the means to perfect it. But Azazel's campaign was also psychological. He taught the art of ornamentation and cosmetics, the making of bracelets, the use of antimony to beautify the eyes. This was not about simple aesthetics. It was a calculated introduction of vanity, materialism, and the art of the false facade. It taught humanity to value the external over the internal, to create an illusion of worth rather than cultivating true character. It was the birth of a culture obsessed with image. Other Watchers opened their own fronts in this ideological war. Armaros taught the resolving of enchantments. Barakijal taught astrology, convincing humans to seek guidance from the stars rather than from their creator. Kokabel taught the constellations, revealing cosmic secrets without the necessary wisdom to understand them. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun, and Sariel the course of the moon. This was a full-spectrum assault on the human mind. Each piece of knowledge was a key that unlocked a new form of rebellion. They taught humanity how to kill more efficiently, how to deceive more effectively, and how to worship the creation instead of the creator. This campaign of forbidden knowledge explains the impossibly rapid decline of civilization described in Genesis. Humanity didn't just fall, they were pushed. They were given the tools and the motives for self-destruction by the very beings who were supposed to be their guardians. The most devastating outcome of this cosmic war, the undeniable evidence of the celestial crime, was biological. The union between the Watcher angels and human women produced an entirely new form of life, an entity that should never have existed. The Bible in Genesis gives them the name Nephilim. The Book of Enoch provides the uncensored, terrifying case file on what they truly were, the first and most effective biological weapon ever deployed against the human race. Enoch's testimony is explicit. These were not simply mighty men or tall kings. They were a hybrid species, an abomination born from the fusion of divine and human DNA. Their very existence was an act of cosmic vandalism, a corruption of God's created order. Their defining characteristic, beyond their legendary size, was a direct result of their unnatural origin, an eternal, insatiable hunger. They were a parasitic species, born into a world they were not designed for. They began to consume it. Enoch details their systematic devastation. First, they consumed all the produce of men, the grain, the wine, the oil. When that was not enough, they consumed the cattle and the birds. When the natural world could no longer satisfy their ravenous appetites, they turned on their creators. They began to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. This is the grim reality behind the brief mention in Genesis. The Nephilim introduced cannibalism and unprecedented bloodshed to the world. They were a plague of violence, a living embodiment of the Watcher's lawless desires. Their existence explains the biblical statement that the earth was filled with violence. It wasn't just human crime. It was a world terrorized by a superior, predatory, hybrid race. This is a critical piece of the deleted chapter of Adam's story. The world of his children was not just morally corrupt, it was physically occupied by monsters. The Nephilim were the living, breathing proof that the war in heaven had established a beachhead on earth. They were the shock troops of the first apocalypse, and their purpose was simple: to terrorize, to consume, and to so thoroughly pollute the human genome that the line of Adam would be corrupted beyond repair. Here we arrive at the core of the forbidden intelligence, the section of the Enochian file that is so disturbing, so operationally significant, that its exclusion from the canonical Bible becomes tragically understandable. This is the truth that directly connects the ancient apocalypse to the spiritual warfare of the present day. This is the uncensored origin story of demons. The common theological explanation for demons is often vague, lumping them in with the original fallen angels who rebelled with Lucifer. But this creates a logical inconsistency. If the fallen angels were bound in chains in darkness, as the New Testament confirms, Who are these legions of spirits actively tormenting humanity on Earth? The Book of Enoch provides the specific, horrifying answer. It is a truth born from the hybrid nature of the Nephilim. When judgment came and the giants were slain, their massive physical bodies perished. But what happened to their spirits? As beings born of both immortal angel and mortal human, their spirits belonged to neither realm. They could not ascend to heaven, for they were tainted with flesh. They could not pass into the quiet rest of the human dead, for they were infused with immortal spirit. Enoch's testimony records their chilling fate. God declares that these disembodied spirits of the giants are now condemned to wander the earth. They are to be called evil spirits, and the earth itself is to be their eternal dwelling and their prison. This is the forbidden truth. The demons that tempt, torment, and possess are not the original watchers. They are the disembodied, malignant ghosts of their monstrous offspring. They are a race of metaphysical orphans, forever trapped between worlds, burning with the insatiable hunger they had in the flesh and a furious resentment for the humanity they can never truly be a part of. This intelligence changes everything about our understanding of spiritual warfare. It reveals that our enemy is not just a distant, fallen angel, but a vast and desperate army of earthbound spirits whose primary tactical objective is to interfere with, corrupt, and ultimately inhabit human beings. They are the psychic shrapnel, the radioactive fallout from that first apocalypse, and their ongoing campaign of terror is the most tangible legacy of the Watcher's ancient crime. The horror unfolding on Earth did not go unnoticed. While humanity was being brutalized and creation itself groaned under the weight of corruption, Enoch's testimony shifts the scene from the blood-soaked battlefield below to the pristine courts of heaven. His account reveals that there were powerful advocates, high-ranking officers in God's celestial government, who witnessed the devastation and took action. Enoch's dossier names the 4 key figures who formed this heavenly prosecution team: Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel. He presents them not as passive observers, but as grieving commanders watching a catastrophe they were not yet authorized to stop. They looked down from heaven and saw the scale of the iniquity, the unrestrained bloodshed, the rampant lawlessness, and the cries of the souls of the dead ascending to the heavens, begging for justice. The text records their solemn appeal to the Lord of all spirits. They do not approach God with demands, but with a formal presentation of the evidence. "You see what Azazel has done," they declare, "how he has taught all unrighteousness on earth and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven." They report on the treason of Semjaza and the catastrophic consequences of his rebellion. This scene is a crucial element of the deleted chapter. It counters the skeptical argument that God was an absent or indifferent landlord watching his creation burn. It reveals a period of divine patience, a time where events were allowed to unfold to their full, horrifying conclusion, perhaps to demonstrate the absolute depravity of the rebellion. But it also shows that this patience was not apathy. The highest angelic authorities were monitoring the situation, cataloging the crimes, and building an irrefutable case for intervention. Their plea is the turning point. It is the moment the prosecution rests its case and formally requests a verdict from the ultimate judge. It confirms that the suffering on earth was an offense to the order of heaven, a violation so profound that it moved the highest powers of the cosmos to demand justice. The archangel's plea was not a request to start a war. It was a demand to end one that had already raged for too long, and the response from the throne would be swift, absolute, and world-altering. The case presented by the archangels was irrefutable. The evidence was overwhelming. Enoch's testimony now brings us to the moment of divine judgment. But the first edict from the throne is not one of destruction, but of preservation. Before sterilizing the contaminated crime scene, the commander-in-chief first secures the assets that must be saved. The Most High issues a series of commands, each a precise tactical maneuver in a global strategic plan. The first order is given to the archangel Uriel, and it links the Enochian narrative directly and inextricably to the canonical Bible. Uriel is commanded to go to the son of Lamech, Noah, and deliver a message of warning and instruction. He is to reveal the coming cataclysm, the great flood, and to instruct Noah on the means of his escape. This is the key that reframes the entire story of Noah's Ark. From the limited perspective of Genesis, the flood can appear as a blanket punishment on a wicked humanity. But through the lens of the Book of Enoch, it is revealed as something far more specific and strategic, a planetary quarantine protocol. The primary purpose of the flood in this context was not just to punish sinful humans, but to completely eradicate the corrupted genetic line of the Nephilim. The hybrid DNA had spread, creating a biological and spiritual pandemic that threatened to permanently alter the human race, the lineage of Adam. The world had to be washed clean, sterilized down to the genetic level to eliminate this non-human contagion. God's first move in this global operation was to establish a clean room, a mobile biosecure unit, the Ark. Noah and his family were not just saved because they were righteous, they were preserved because they were genetically pure, the last untainted remnants of Adam's original line. The Ark was not just a boat carrying a family and some animals. It was a genetic repository, a time capsule containing the uncorrupted source code of humanity and the animal kingdom, designed to reboot life on a cleansed planet. This verdict shows a God forced into a terrible choice: enact a devastating quarantine to save the entire human project, or allow it to be consumed by an alien, monstrous corruption. He chose survival. With the future of Adam's pure lineage secured aboard the Ark, the divine verdict turns to the original perpetrators of the first apocalypse, the Watchers themselves. Enoch's account details their sentencing not as a vague banishment, but with the cold, hard precision of a military tribunal dealing with high treason. They are not merely punished, they are neutralized and contained as prisoners of war. The sentences are specific, tailored to the crimes of the lead conspirators. The Lord commands Raphael to deal with Azazel, the angel who armed humanity and taught them deception. Azazel is to be bound hand and foot, cast into a pit in a desolate desert called Dudael, and covered with sharp rocks. He is condemned to total darkness, a fitting punishment for a being who brought so much dark knowledge into the light. Crucially, the text declares that all sin should be ascribed to him, identifying him as a primary source of the world's corruption. The sentence for the leader of the conspiracy, Semjaza, and his followers is delivered by Michael, the great warrior prince of heaven. Their punishment is compounded with a unique psychological torment. They are forced to witness the annihilation of their own children. They must watch as their monstrous Nephilim offspring are driven to destroy one another in a brutal civil war. Only after seeing the horrific failure of their legacy are they themselves to be bound. Their prison is not some distant, fiery hell. Enoch is explicit. They are to be bound in the valleys of the earth. They are imprisoned here, within the very fabric of the world they sought to corrupt, held in unseen chains. Their sentence is given a specific duration, 70 generations. This is not an arbitrary number, it is a prophetic countdown. They are being held in a terrestrial prison, awaiting a final parole hearing on the great day of judgment. This detailed sentencing is a crucial part of the deleted chapter. It reveals a universe governed by strict laws and inescapable consequences. The Watchers, who sought to break free from their heavenly domain, are now more imprisoned than any human. They craved earthly experience and are now buried within the earth itself. It is a portrait of perfect, symmetrical justice, confirming that in this cosmic war, no act of treason goes unpunished. In this epic drama of gods and monsters, rebellion and judgment, the Book of Enoch places a mortal man at the very center of the proceedings. Enoch is not merely a historian recording events from a distance. He is an active, divinely appointed intermediary. Heaven bestows upon him a unique and solemn title that defines his role, the Scribe of Righteousness. He is the official court reporter for this cosmic tribunal. This role elevates Enoch to an unprecedented position in human history. After the verdicts are handed down from the throne of God, it is Enoch who is tasked with the terrifying mission of delivering the sentence. He, a man of flesh and blood, a descendant of Adam, must stand before the 200 powerful, immortal Watchers and read them their charges and their unalterable doom. Imagine the scene. The once proud celestial beings, now stripped of their authority, are filled with fear and trembling. Their arrogance has been shattered. In a moment of utter desperation, they turn to the very creature they sought to corrupt for help. They beg Enoch to act as their advocate, to write a petition on their behalf, a formal appeal for mercy to be presented to the God they no longer dare to address directly. True to his title as a scribe of righteousness, Enoch does not refuse. He faithfully records their pleas, their words of remorse, and their desperate arguments for clemency. He carries their petition to the very foot of Mount Hermon, the site of their original crime, and reads it aloud, interceding for them until he collapses in exhaustion. But the answer he receives in a vision is absolute. The appeal is denied. The verdict is final. And it is Enoch who must return to the weeping, defeated angels and deliver the final, crushing news. This role is a crucial part of the deleted chapter because it establishes a profound theological point. God chose a human to be the arbiter of truth in a conflict between angels. It elevates humanity's position in the cosmic order. While the Watchers fell through pride and disobedience, Enoch is exalted through his faithfulness and obedience. He is the ultimate counter-example to their rebellion, a living testament to the righteousness that Adam was meant to embody. He is not just a prophet, he is the human prosecutor, scribe, and messenger in the trial of the fallen gods. To validate the authority of the judgments he carries, Enoch is granted access to the very source of that authority. His testimony now shifts from a legal proceeding to a profound mystical experience. He is taken on a guided tour of the heavenly realms, a journey designed to strip away any doubt about the power and majesty of the God he serves. This isn't a dream, it's a sensory overload, a direct perception of a reality beyond human comprehension. he describes being carried into the heavens, arriving at a house built of stones of crystal. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, all gleam with an impossible light. The structure itself is surrounded by a river of fire, and its gates burn with an eternal flame. As he enters, he is hit by a paradox of sensation. It is as hot as fire and as cold as ice. There is no joy here, only a profound, terrifying awe. Fear seizes him, and he falls prostrate, his mortal frame unable to withstand the raw holiness of the place. But this is only the antechamber. As he lies on the ground, he sees another house, greater still, built entirely of living flames. The floor is a river of fire, the ceiling a storm of lightning and fiery cherubim. And in the center of this impossible structure, he beholds the object of his journey, the throne of the great glory. He struggles to describe it. It looks like frost. Its wheels shine like the sun. Streams of blazing fire issue from beneath it, so bright he cannot look directly at it. And seated upon this throne is a presence whose raiment is brighter than the sun and whiter than any snow. The glory is so immense that no angel, no celestial being can endure to look upon his face. This vision is the ultimate credential. The judgments Enoch delivered to the watchers were not his own opinions or interpretations. They were direct edicts issued from this very throne, the seat of all power, the source of all reality. The terror and awe of this experience serve a narrative purpose: to establish beyond any doubt that the story we are being told, the verdicts we have heard, and the prophecies that are to come originate from the absolute, unchallengeable sovereign of the universe. Enoch's journey to the throne was not just to validate his past mission, it was to receive his next one. Having recorded the judgment on the watchers, he is now shown the final, terrifying conclusion of the cosmic war they started. He is given a vision of the end of days, the ultimate apocalypse, when all accounts will be settled and all corruption will be purged from creation forever. His prophecy, recorded thousands of years before the Book of Revelation was ever written, contains hauntingly similar imagery. He declares that the Holy Great One will one day descend upon the earth, and all shall be smitten with fear, he writes, and the watchers shall quake. This is not a quiet return. It is a world-shattering event. The highest mountains will crumble, the hills will be laid low, and the very fabric of the earth will be torn apart. This future event is presented as the final closing of the case file that began with the Watchers' descent. The judgment they received, being bound in the valleys of the earth for 70 generations, was a temporary sentence. The true final punishment awaits them in this future apocalypse. Enoch sees the fiery abyss, the place of eternal torment, prepared not only for the fallen angels but for all the ungodly who followed their ways. Crucially, Enoch's vision introduces a figure central to this final judgment, the Son of Man, also called the Elect One. This righteous being, chosen by the Lord of Spirits before the creation of the world, will sit upon a throne of glory and execute perfect justice. The kings and the mighty of the earth, who built their power on the forbidden knowledge of the Watchers, will be toppled. The sinners will be judged, and the righteous will be vindicated. This prophecy does two critical things. First, it connects the ancient crime of the Watchers directly to the final destiny of the world, showing it as one continuous narrative of rebellion and redemption. Second, it proves that the concept of a final, apocalyptic judgment and a divine Messiah figure was not a new idea introduced in the New Testament. It was an ancient truth revealed to a prophet who walked with God long before the flood, a descendant of Adam who saw the end from the beginning. The Book of Enoch is not just a history of the first apocalypse. It is a prophecy of the ultimate one. We now arrive at the heart of the conspiracy, the central question demanded by our investigation: why? Why was this chapter so rich in context, so vital to understanding the full scope of the cosmic war and the story of Adam, systematically deleted from the official record that would become our Bible? The answer is not found in a single smoke-filled room, but in a long, slow process of theological and political calculation. The motive for hiding this war was control. The testimony of Enoch is a wild, untamable narrative. It presents a universe far more chaotic and dangerous than the simplified version we often receive. It is a story where the lines between heaven and earth are permeable, where divine beings can rebel and commit horrific crimes, and where humanity is caught in the crossfire, both as sinner and as victim. For the gatekeepers of later religious institutions, this complexity was a threat. To maintain control over a growing populace, to build a cohesive and easily digestible doctrine, a simpler story was required. A narrative was needed that placed the burden of sin squarely on human shoulders, making the solution, adherence to the institution's authority, equally simple. The Enochian narrative disrupts this clean formula. If humanity's fall was catastrophically accelerated by a celestial invasion and the subsequent plague of their demonic offspring, then the problem of evil becomes far more complex. It suggests that our struggle is not just against our own nature, but against a powerful, occupying force. This is an empowering truth for the individual, but a dangerous one for an institution that wishes to be the sole mediator between God and man. It was far easier, far safer, to redact the file. By sidelining the Book of Enoch, they could downplay the role of the angelic rebellion, sanitize the horrifying details of the Nephilim, and effectively erase the first apocalypse from the popular consciousness. They didn't need to burn the book. They just needed to label it as non-canonical, apocryphal, pushing it into the shadows of academic curiosity. In doing so, they, the succession of councils and theologians who prized order over revelation, hid this from you. They chose a simpler, more controllable story over the messy, terrifying, and liberating truth of the full cosmic war. The decision to delete the Enochian chapter from the mainstream narrative was not without consequence. This act of redaction, however well-intentioned, left a profound scar on the spiritual consciousness of the Western world. By removing the detailed context of the first apocalypse, the gatekeepers created a faith that was doctrinally cleaner, but experientially incomplete. They left the soldiers on the battlefield without a proper map of the terrain or a complete dossier on the enemy. The first and most significant consequence was the creation of the very plot holes that now fuel the skepticism of so many. The questions that haunt the logical mind about Cain's wife, the Nephilim, the sudden explosion of evil, are not flaws in the Bible itself. They are the jagged edges of a chapter that has been torn out. The silence in Genesis 6 is not a mystery. It is an editorial decision. The gatekeepers, in their pursuit of a simpler narrative, inadvertently armed future generations of atheists and critics with the very inconsistencies they sought to avoid. The second consequence was the infantilization of our understanding of evil. The full, terrifying scope of the enemy was reduced to a single, almost cartoonish figure of the devil and the abstract concept of temptation. The gritty, tactical reality of a war against specific earthbound entities, the demonic spirits of the Nephilim, was replaced with a vague internal moral struggle. This left believers unprepared for the intensity and the often external nature of the spiritual attacks they would face, leading many to the despairing conclusion that their struggles were solely the result of their own personal weakness. Finally, by hiding the story of the Watchers, they obscured the true scale of God's redemptive plan. The mission of Christ was not just to save humanity from the sin of Adam. It was a full-scale counter-offensive, a divine D-Day to reclaim a world that had been illegally occupied. Jesus' exorcisms were not merely acts of healing. They were acts of liberation, casting out the very entities whose origin is detailed in Enoch. The apocalypse described in Revelation is not a new war. It is the final battle of the same war that began in the days of Jared. By deleting the first chapter, they made the last chapter harder to understand. They gave us the story of the victory, but they hid the full story of what was being vanquished. Do not make the mistake of believing this ancient war is a relic of the past, a closed case file relevant only to historians. The act of deleting the first chapter did not end the story. The legacy of that first apocalypse is not written in ancient scrolls. It is written in the headlines of our daily news and in the silent struggles of our own hearts. The war continues, and we are all living on the battlefield. We are heirs to a dual, conflicting legacy. From Adam, we inherit the wound of original sin, a natural inclination towards disobedience, a brokenness in our very nature that separates us from God. This is the internal struggle, the civil war within our own souls. This is the part of the story we have been told. But from the Watchers, we inherit a different, external reality, a world that has been systematically booby-trapped. The forbidden knowledge they unleashed has become the operating system of modern civilization. The glorification of violence, the obsession with physical appearance, the worship of wealth and power, the drive to seek knowledge and control outside of divine limits, these are not new temptations. They are the ancient poisons of Azazel and Semjaza, now amplified to a global scale by technology. The demonic spirits of the Nephilim, the earthbound ghosts of that first hybrid generation, continue their ancient mandate. They are the unseen force that pushes societal conflict towards bloodshed, that twists personal anxiety into crippling despair, and that inflames simple lust into life-destroying addiction. When you understand this dual legacy, your own struggles begin to make a terrifying kind of sense. The reason the fight feels overwhelming is because it is a war on two fronts. You are fighting an internal battle against your Adamic nature, while simultaneously being assaulted by external forces whose sole purpose is to exploit that very weakness. The official record only told you about the civil war. The deleted chapter from the Book of Enoch reveals the truth of the foreign invasion. Recognizing this doesn't make the fight easier, but it makes it understandable. You are not weak, you are at war. We have now returned to where our investigation began, but we are no longer looking at an unsolved crime. We are looking at a complete, albeit horrifying, picture. The question is no longer, why was this chapter deleted, but what does its restoration mean for us right now? The answer is simple and profound. It provides the key to understanding. For the person struggling with a faith that seems illogical, this story matters. It demonstrates that the biblical narrative is not a collection of simplistic fables, but a highly condensed account of a complex and coherent cosmic history. The supposed plot holes are not errors, they are scars from an editorial process. The Book of Enoch provides the missing logical tissue, the connective evidence that allows a rational mind to see the internal consistency of the divine plan, even in its most terrifying moments. It shows that it is possible to have a faith that does not require the abandonment of reason. For the person fighting a losing battle against a recurring sin or addiction, this story matters. It reframes your struggle. You are not just fighting a bad habit, you are fighting an ancient enemy with a documented playbook. The overwhelming sense of shame and weakness can be replaced by the strategic awareness of a soldier. Recognizing that the whisper of temptation may not be your own voice, but the voice of an external, hostile entity, is a revolutionary act of self-defense. It does not remove your responsibility, but it gives you a target to fight against, rather than just yourself. And for every spiritual archaeologist who has ever felt that the story they were given was incomplete, this story matters. It validates your intuition. It confirms that there is more to the story, that deeper truths have been buried. The restoration of this deleted chapter from Adam's story is a testament to the fact that no truth can be hidden forever. The key to a deeper, more robust, and more resilient faith lies not in ignoring the difficult questions, but in having the courage to excavate the answers. The evidence has been presented. The missing file on Adam's true history, the testimony concerning heaven's first war, has been unsealed. We have demonstrated that the Book of Enoch is not a medieval forgery, but an ancient witness whose words echo within the pages of the Bible itself. We have shown how its contents provide the crucial logical context for the most troubling questions in Genesis. And we have revealed why a story this vital was deemed too inconvenient for the final cut. The silence has been broken. The reason for the redaction has been exposed. Now, a choice rests with you, the investigator. You can close this file, dismiss this testimony as mere folklore, and return to the comfort of the simplified, official narrative. Or you can accept the profound and unsettling implications of this deleted chapter. You can choose to see the world not as a simple stage for human morality, but as the active battlefield of a cosmic war. You can choose to see your own struggles not just as personal failings, but as skirmishes in that ancient conflict. They hid this from you, perhaps believing you couldn't handle a truth so vast. But the age of gatekeepers is over. The choice to restore the full story, to read the director's cut of our own history, is now yours. This knowledge does not weaken faith, it forges it into a weapon. The excavation has just begun. Join the investigation in the comments below. Which piece of evidence from this deleted chapter, this account of the first apocalypse, has most profoundly changed your understanding of Adam's story?